4 days before Christmas, I was still at my desk at 7:12 p.m., adjusting the last slide of a client deck that I'd already revised 3 times. Not because anyone forced me to stay late, because that's what you do when you're the person who actually owns the relationship. My biggest account, Orchard Ridge, was the kind of client that didn't just renew. They asked questions that made executives sweat. They had lawyers on speed dial, and if they ever felt like we were sloppy, they didn't complain. They left. I'd spent 2 years getting them to trust us. 2 years of late-night calls, Sunday fixes, and I'll handle it messages when everyone else was offline. Which is why the text that came in next didn't make sense at first. It was a group message. Management plus a few people I didn't expect to see in the same thread. My director, Craig, someone from HR, a VP I'd met twice, and my name, typed like a label. Better if he doesn't show up to the holiday dinner. That was it. No hey, no context, no reason. Just an instruction written the way people talk about a problem they're trying to remove without creating noise. I read it 3 times, not because I didn't understand the words, but because I understood the intent. The holiday dinner wasn't just a party. It was where Orchard Ridge's leadership was coming. The CFO, the procurement director, their head of compliance. They'd accepted the invite because I'd been the one calling them for weeks, telling them I'd be there, telling them we'd take care of them. And now, 4 days before Christmas, my management chain was telling me not to show up. I leaned back in my chair and looked around the office. Most of the floor was empty. The cleaning crew was starting their rounds, pushing those quiet carts that make you feel like you're the only person left in a building that's already moved on. My first instinct was irritation. My second instinct was something colder. Because in corporate life, people don't send messages like that unless they want 2 things. Your compliance proof of your compliance. If I simply replied, okay, they could screenshot it, drop it into a file, and later say I chose not to attend, or that I didn't prioritize client engagement, or that I wasn't a culture fit. And if Orchard Ridge asked why their point person wasn't there, Craig could smile and say Ryan couldn't make it, like it was a personal failure, not a directive. That's the trap. They don't fire you in the open. They build a story where you fired yourself. I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel helpless. I felt clear. I opened the thread again and looked at the names. I made a mental note of who was included and who wasn't, because that matters. That tells you who's in on it. Then I took a screenshot, not dramatically, just routinely, like you do when something might matter later. I checked my calendar next. The dinner invitation was still there, with my name listed as host. The guest list included Orchard Ridge. I opened the notes, talking points, introductions, the agenda Craig had asked me to draft. So leadership looks aligned. Aligned. Right. Then I opened the last email from Orchard Ridge's procurement director, sent that same morning. Looking forward to seeing you all on Friday. Ryan, thanks for organizing. I stared at my own name for a second. That's what made my hands stop moving. Because if I didn't show up, this wouldn't just be office politics. This would touch a client. It would touch contract confidence. It would touch revenue, which meant it would touch legal. And the moment legal gets involved, the game changes. People who love drama suddenly hate documentation. People who talk big suddenly talk carefully. I went back to the group text. I didn't type fast. I didn't type angry. I typed like a person who understands how corporate records work. I wrote, understood, just to confirm. Am I being directed not to attend a client-facing event for an account I manage? If so, please confirm who will be the point of contact for Orchard Ridge that evening so I can update them appropriately. Then I stopped. Read it twice. Removed anything that sounded emotional. Added one final sentence. I want to make sure we're aligned on the record, since the client accepted based on my attendance. I hit send. And then I did something else people rarely do in moments like this. I didn't sit there waiting for the reply. I created a folder on my desktop called Year End. Inside it, I dropped the screenshot, the calendar invite, and the procurement email. I wrote down the time the message was sent. I copied the names from the thread into a note, exactly as they appeared. Not because I was plotting revenge, because when someone tries to erase you quietly, the only defense is a timeline that doesn't rely on your memory. 2 minutes passed, 5, then the group thread lit up again. Craig replied first. No need to involve the client. We'll handle it. That sentence almost made me laugh because it told me everything. He didn't deny the instruction. He didn't explain why. He just wanted me to stop putting it in writing. HR followed with something softer. Let's circle tomorrow. We're just trying to keep things smooth. Smooth. Another word that means quiet. Controllable. No record. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I'd already done what I had to do. I closed my laptop, put on my coat, and walked out into the parking garage. The air was cold enough to sting. I remember that detail because it was the first time all day I actually felt something in my body. I drove home in silence, and I didn't tell myself stories to calm down. I didn't assume it was just miscommunication. I didn't pretend Craig had my best interests. Because when someone says, don't show up, 4 days before Christmas, and your biggest client is on the guest list, it's never just a dinner, it's a setup. I was halfway through heating up leftovers when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Then I saw the voicemail preview pop up as it rang again. Hi, this is Maya, from legal. Can you call me back tonight? It's regarding the holiday dinner and your account. My fork stopped midair. Because legal doesn't call you at night to keep things smooth. Legal calls when someone just created a liability, and they're trying to figure out who saw it first. And in that moment, I realized something that made the room feel too quiet. Craig didn't just want me absent. He wanted me absent before year end. And he wanted a reason that sounded like my fault. I set my food down. Then I called legal back. Maya from legal didn't sound angry. She sounded careful. Not the we're about to sue someone kind of careful. The we need to know exactly what happened before someone lies to us kind. Ryan, she said, I'm calling because your message in that thread raised a flag. I need to ask you a few questions, and I want you to answer as plainly as possible. Is that okay? I told her yes. She asked if I'd been instructed not to attend the holiday dinner. I said, yes. The text says, better if he doesn't show up. She asked if Orchard Ridge was a client-facing account event. I said, yes. Their CFO and procurement director accepted the invite based on my attendance. Then she paused. Not a dramatic pause. The kind of pause where someone is reading something on their screen and realizing it's worse than they expected. Do you have the screenshots? She asked. I do, I said. Please email them to me now and include the calendar invite and any client correspondence showing they expected you there. I sent it while we were still on the phone. She didn't promise me anything. She didn't explain her strategy. She simply said, thank you. Please don't discuss this internally tonight. If anyone contacts you, let me know. When you hear that from legal, it's not a request. It's a warning. Someone is going to contact you. I slept poorly. Not because I was scared of losing my job, because I was trying to understand the motive. Craig wasn't stupid. He'd been in leadership long enough to know you don't mess with client events without a reason, especially not in writing. So why would he do it? The next morning, the answers started to form on my calendar. At 8:06 a.m., I opened Outlook and saw 3 things. The holiday dinner invite was still there, but I was no longer the host. My name had been removed from the agenda attachment. A new meeting had been added to my calendar for 9 a.m., titled Year-End Alignment, Leadership Only. I wasn't invited to that one. That's how corporate exclusion begins. Not with a confrontation, with quiet edits. I clicked into the holiday dinner details and looked at the tracking tab. The new host was Craig, and someone else, someone I'd trained, was now marked as required. Melissa, junior account lead, smart, hardworking, but green. The kind of person who would say yes to anything if it sounded like an opportunity. I didn't blame her. Not yet. I walked into the office and kept my face neutral. No slamming doors, no sighing, no, "Can we talk?" Because the minute you show emotion, they label it unstable, defensive, not collaborative. Craig was already building a story. I wasn't going to hand him adjectives. At 9:18 a.m., I got the first call. It wasn't Craig, it was HR. Dana, our HR business partner, had that friendly tone that never matches the content. "Hey Ryan, quick pulse check. Everything okay?" Everything okay? It's the corporate version of walking into a crime scene and asking if you want water. "I'm fine," I said. "Why?" "Well," she said, stretching the word like it was delicate, "there's been some feedback about your approach with Orchard Ridge. We're just trying to keep things smooth going into the holidays." There it was again. Smooth. I said, "What feedback?" She hesitated. "More like concerns about communication style, about ownership." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. When they can't point to a real performance issue, they talk about your style. Style is vague. Style can't be measured. Style can be repeated until it becomes common knowledge. I asked, "Did that concern appear before the message telling me not to attend the dinner?" Silence. Then Dana cleared her throat. "I don't want to get into specifics over the phone. We can discuss in person." I didn't push. I didn't argue. I just said, "Sure, put it on the calendar." After the call, I opened my sent items and reread the email I'd sent legal last night, with the screenshots attached. And I did one more thing. I exported the email chain to a PDF and saved it in that same year-end folder. Because if Dana's words ever became a written narrative, I wanted my own record to exist in the same format. At 10:02 a.m., I saw Melissa walking toward Craig's office with a notebook tucked to her chest like a shield. She glanced at me and then looked away. That was my first real emotional hit of the day. Not anger, something worse. The feeling of being replaced by someone who didn't even realize she was being used. I kept working. I answered emails. I made calls. I didn't let anyone see my pulse. Then at 12:11 p.m., Orchard Ridge's procurement director emailed me directly. Subject line, "Dinner, point of contact." The message was short. "Hey Ryan, just confirming you'll be there Friday." Craig's assistant forwarded an updated agenda, and it doesn't list you. "Want to make sure we're aligned." I stared at the screen for a long moment, because this wasn't internal anymore. This was the client telling me, politely, that leadership had already begun rewriting reality, and I could already predict how Craig would handle it. He'd tell them I was unavailable. He'd present Melissa as a continuity plan. He'd make it sound like a smooth transition, and then if anything went wrong, which it would, he'd blame me for not setting her up. That's how you steal an account without touching it. You move the client away from the person who holds the trust, and then you call it team alignment. I didn't respond right away. I forwarded the email to Maya in legal with one line, "Client is noticing. This is now external." Then I typed a reply to Orchard Ridge that was calm, professional, and very specific. "Thanks for checking. I'm still the account owner and have been planning to attend. I'm confirming internally and will update you by end of day." I hit send, and as soon as I did, my phone rang again. Craig. He didn't start with hello. He started with control. "Ryan, why are you messaging the client about this?" I said. "Because they messaged me." "They didn't need to," he snapped. "We're handling it. You're making this bigger than it needs to be." I took a breath and kept my voice flat. "Craig," I said, "they noticed I was removed from the agenda. That's already big. I'm not going to lie to the client." He lowered his voice like that made it reasonable. "Listen," he said, "we just need you to keep your head down this week. Let Melissa run point. You can support from the background." Support from the background. That's the sentence where your career starts to disappear. I said, "Is that an official directive?" He paused because he knew why I asked. "Ryan," he said, "don't play games." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten him. I didn't even accuse him. I just said, "Put it in writing." Then I hung up, and for the first time, I saw the real outline of what was happening. They weren't trying to fix a problem. They were trying to move the client away from me before year end, without leaving fingerprints. But here's the part Craig didn't understand. When someone tries to erase you quietly, the safest thing you can do is stop reacting and start documenting. Because by the time they realize the record exists, it's already too late. That afternoon at 3:47 p.m., my calendar changed again. A meeting popped up for the next morning. Performance touch point, HR plus director, no agenda, no notes, just a time and a room. And I knew exactly what they were about to do. But that was just the beginning. The next morning, I got to the office early on purpose. Not to prove I cared, not to look loyal, to think without noise. I printed 2 things and put them in a plain folder, the original group text and Orchard Ridge's email asking why my name disappeared from the agenda. Because I knew what that performance touchpoint meeting was going to be. It wasn't about performance. It was about framing. They were going to sit me in a room with HR, say a few vague words like alignment and communication style, and then write a summary that sounded reasonable enough to justify whatever came next. And the worst part? If you let them control the summary, you spend the next 6 months arguing with a document instead of a person. At 9 a.m., I walked into a small conference room with glass walls. Dana from HR was already there with a laptop open. Craig sat beside her, leaning back like he'd practiced looking calm. Dana smiled too quickly. Craig didn't smile at all. "Thanks for coming," Dana said. "We just want to talk through some concerns." I sat down and placed my folder on the table. I didn't open it. I just left it there, visible. Craig started. "Ryan, you've been difficult lately. You're not collaborating the way we need. You're creating friction." I waited. Let him talk. He went on about tone, escalations, not following leadership direction, nothing measurable, nothing that could be disproven in a spreadsheet. Dana nodded at the right moments like she'd heard this script before. Then Dana took over. "We've also heard feedback that you can be territorial with clients." Territorial. The word hit a nerve because that wasn't an accident. That was the label they needed. If I'm territorial, then it's reasonable to redistribute responsibilities. If I'm difficult, then it's reasonable to limit client exposure. If I'm not aligned, then it's reasonable to remove me from the dinner and call it team continuity. I looked at Dana and said, "Can you be specific?" Dana glanced at Craig. Craig shrugged like he was being generous. "Orchard Ridge," he said. "You're acting like it's your account, not the company's." I held my face still, because that statement wasn't just unfair, it was strategic. I said, "Orchard Ridge is the company's account. I'm the assigned account owner. That's why my name was on the agenda until it was removed yesterday." Craig's jaw tightened. "This isn't about the agenda." I nodded once, like I agreed. Then I slid the folder forward and opened it. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't slap papers down. I just put the printed screenshot of the group message on the table, with the names visible. "Then let's keep this clean," I said. "This was sent 4 days before a client-facing dinner." Dana's eyes flicked down to the paper. Craig's didn't. I turned the page and placed the Orchard Ridge email beside it. "And this," I said, "is the client noticing my removal. So if the concern is my tone, fine. But the actual risk is that leadership told me not to attend, changed the host, removed my name, and now the client is asking why." Dana's HR smile faltered for half a second. Craig leaned forward. "Ryan, you're twisting this." I didn't argue. I asked one question. "Am I being directed not to attend the dinner?" Craig opened his mouth, then closed it. Donna tried to rescue the moment. "We're just trying to make sure the event goes smoothly." "There have been concerns," I cut in, still calm. That's not an answer. If I'm directed not to attend, I need it in writing because the client invited me directly. If I'm not directed, I'll be there as planned. Silence. Not the awkward kind, the professional kind where everyone realizes there's no safe sentence left. Craig exhaled through his nose like I was annoying him. We're asking you to let Melissa run point, he said. Support from the background. It's temporary. Temporary until when? I asked. Craig's eyes hardened. Until we're past year end. There it was. A timeline. A motive. Year end meant renewals, bonuses, and internal credit. It meant leadership reviews. It meant who gets praised for saving a relationship and who gets blamed for risk. I watched Donna type something on her laptop, and I knew she was writing the first draft of the story. Ryan was defensive. Ryan pushed back. Ryan refused direction. So I took control of the record in the only way that works in corporate life. I said, Dana, please include this in your notes. I am asking for a clear directive regarding attendance at the Orchard Ridge dinner, due to client expectation and reputational risk. I also want it documented that my concern is client trust, not internal politics. Dana's fingers paused. Craig stared at me like he couldn't believe I'd said it out loud. Dana recovered. Okay, she said carefully. We'll note that. Craig tapped the table once with his fingertip. Ryan, you're turning this into a legal thing. I didn't smile, but I almost did. Because he was right. He just didn't understand why that scared him more than it scared me. I didn't make it legal, I said. The text did. Dana looked between us. Let's take a breath, she said, like we were both equally emotional. Then Craig tried a different angle. You want to know why? Fine. Orchard Ridge has been unhappy. They've complained about responsiveness. I knew that was a lie the moment he said it, because Orchard Ridge didn't complain like that. They escalated formally through procurement. They documented everything. That's who they were. So I asked, when did they complain? Who did they complain to? Can you forward it? Craig's mouth tightened again. Dana jumped in. This isn't about debating details. It is, I said, still even. Because if Orchard Ridge is unhappy, I need to know so I can address it. If they're not unhappy, then we're just rewriting reality. Craig stood up like he wanted to end it on his terms. Meeting's over, he said. We'll follow up. I stood too. I didn't look rattled. I didn't look victorious. I looked awake. Back at my desk, I didn't vent to coworkers. I didn't send a dramatic email. I did something quieter and far more damaging to their plan. I wrote a short recap email to Dana and Craig. Subject, Recap, Orchard Ridge, Holiday Dinner Attendance. I kept it polite. Clinical. Confirmed I received management text stating it would be better if I don't show up. Confirmed client has now noticed my name removed from the agenda. Requested written directive on whether I am expected to attend. Noted my concern is client expectation and reputational risk. I attached the same screenshot and client email. Then I sent it. A minute later, my phone buzzed with a message from Maya, in legal. Thank you. Do not delete anything. If anyone asks you to clean up communications, let me know. I sat back and stared at the screen, and something in me shifted, because I realized I'd spent years being the person who absorbed pressure so other people could look good. I'd smoothed things over, I'd taken blame, I'd protected leadership from the mess, and now I understood the truth. I wasn't being punished for doing something wrong. I was being moved out of the way so someone else could collect the credit. That night, I stopped being the hero. I became the record. And 2 hours later, at 6:23 p.m., Orchard Ridge's CFO emailed one line to the entire thread. Me, Craig, Melissa, and 2 unfamiliar names from their side. Quick question. Why is our primary contact changing days before a client dinner? I read that line 3 times. Because Craig had already started the transition without telling them the truth, and now the client had asked it in writing, publicly, in front of everyone. And I knew exactly what would happen next. Craig would panic. Melissa would freeze. HR would scramble. And legal would stop being polite. That was just the beginning. The CFO's emails sat in everyone's inbox like a lit match. Quick question. Why is our primary contact changing days before a client dinner? Craig replied within 3 minutes. Not to answer, just to control. Happy to discuss live. We're optimizing coverage for the holidays. Optimizing coverage. That's what you say when you're trying to move someone out without admitting you moved them out. Melissa didn't reply at all, and I didn't either. Not yet. Because the worst thing you can do in a thread like that is become emotional in front of a CFO. The second worst thing is say something helpful that contradicts leadership and turns into a blame war. So I did what I'd been doing since this started. I forwarded the CFO email to Maya, in legal. Then I waited. 2 minutes later, my phone rang. Craig again. This time he didn't bother pretending. What are you doing? He snapped. I'm reading the email, I said. Don't play dumb, he said. You've been stirring this up all week. Now the CFO is questioning us in writing. I kept my voice flat. He's questioning you. I didn't ask him to. Craig's tone dropped lower, controlled, dangerous. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to reply and tell them you're taking PTO, and Melissa is covering. Make it clean. I didn't respond right away, because there it was. The plan wasn't team continuity. It was a forced narrative. Ryan chose to step away. Craig, I said, I'm not lying to a client's CFO. Then don't reply at all, he said. Stay out of it. Staying out of it is also a statement, I said. They asked a direct question. Silence looks like confirmation. He exhaled like I was a child. You're not the account. You're an employee. And then, like he couldn't help himself, he added, just do what you're told. This is bigger than you. That line didn't scare me anymore. It clarified everything. I hung up without arguing and walked straight to Dana in HR. Not to complain. To document. I stood in her doorway and said calmly, the client's CFO asked why the primary contact is changing. Craig is directing me to tell them I'm taking PTO. I'm not. I need HR to clarify what the company position is before I respond. Dana's eyes widened for half a second, and then she did that HR thing. She softened her face like she was holding a fragile object. Let's not escalate, she said. It's already escalated, I said. It's in the client's CFO's inbox. Dana told me to wait. At 12:26 p.m., a new meeting appeared on my calendar. Urgent, client comms alignment. Attendees, Craig, Dana, Melissa, Maya, legal, and someone I'd never met, Evan, compliance. Compliance doesn't join alignment meetings unless someone's worried about rules being broken. I walked into the conference room and immediately felt the temperature. Craig was already talking when I sat down, like he wanted the room to hear his version first. This is becoming disruptive, he said. We need to protect the relationship from internal drama. Maya didn't react. She just opened her laptop and said, we're not here to discuss feelings. We're here because a client CFO asked a governance question in writing. Evan from compliance nodded once, very slightly. No smile, no small talk. Dana tried to keep control. Let's keep this constructive. Craig turned to Maya like she was a referee. Legal's involved because Ryan is escalating everything. Maya finally looked up. Craig, the reason legal is involved is because a client-facing instruction was given in writing and then you attempted to manage the record after the fact. Craig blinked. That's not what happened. Maya didn't argue. She asked a question. Did you send the message that stated it would be better if he doesn't show up to a client dinner? Craig's eyes flicked to Dana for help. Dana stared at her screen. Craig said, it was a casual phrasing. The intent was... Maya cut him off, still polite. Yes or no? Craig's jaw tightened. Yes. Did you subsequently remove Ryan from the agenda and change the host? Craig hesitated. I updated the invite, yes. Did you communicate to the client that Ryan would no longer be primary contact prior to doing so? Craig's face hardened. We were planning to. This week. Maya nodded like she was checking boxes. Then she turned slightly to me. Ryan, did you tell the client any internal details? No, I said. I told them I'm confirming internally and I'd update by end of day. Evan from compliance finally spoke. His voice was calm, like an auditor reading numbers. Craig, he said, if a client's CFO is asking why a contact is changing days before a scheduled event, the answer can't be optimizing coverage if the reality is internal personnel action, especially if there's any performance process ongoing. Craig snapped, There is no personnel action. Maya looked at him, Then stop acting like there is. The room went silent, and in that silence something shifted. Because Craig's power wasn't in what he could do to me, his power was in people being afraid to challenge him. Legal wasn't afraid, compliance wasn't afraid, and HR was now trapped between them. Dana cleared her throat. We just need a path forward. Maya closed her laptop halfway and said, Here's the path forward. We answered the CFO's question professionally, without misrepresentation. We do not attribute PTO that doesn't exist. We do not imply voluntary absence if it's a directive. Craig leaned forward. So what? Ryan replies, and undermines leadership. Maya's eyes stayed on him. Leadership undermined itself when it created a record that doesn't match reality. Then she turned to me again. Ryan, you will respond to the CFO. You will say you remain the account owner and will be present at the dinner. You will also state that Melissa will be supporting the team. Nothing more. Craig's head snapped toward her. No, absolutely not. Melissa is running point. Evan's voice was still calm, but it landed heavier than Craig's. If the client expectation is Ryan's attendance, Evan said, and the CFO is asking in writing, removing him now increases risk. That's not a preference issue. That's governance. Craig looked around the room like he was searching for someone to back him up. Dana didn't. Melissa finally spoke, quietly. I didn't ask for this, she said. I was told you wanted me to take over. Craig shot her a look that could have cut glass. And that was the moment I saw her realize she'd been used. Her face went pale. Not dramatic, just awake. Like mine had been a few days earlier. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look at Craig. I looked at Maya and said, I'll write the response and send it to you for review before it goes to the client. Maya nodded once. Do that. Craig stood up, angry now because he'd lost control of the story. This is unbelievable, he said. Ryan is weaponizing legal. Maya didn't raise her voice. She said one sentence that felt like a door closing. Craig, if you contact Ryan again to pressure him into misrepresenting facts to a client, I want it in writing. Craig froze. Not because he respected her, because he understood what that sentence meant. I walked out of the room and went back to my desk with a steadiness that surprised even me. I drafted the email to Orchard Ridge's CFO. Simple, clean. Thanks for flagging. I remain the account owner and will be at Friday's dinner as planned. Melissa will be joining to support continuity through the holidays. Looking forward to seeing you. I sent it to Maya for review. 3 minutes later, she replied, Approved. Send. Also, you are now under a formal preservation notice. Do not delete anything. If anyone asks you to clean up messages, forward it to me immediately. That was the first moment all week I felt something like relief. Not because I'd won, because the game had changed from rumors to records. I hit send to the CFO. Then at 4:18 p.m., an email went out company-wide to a very short list. Me, Craig, Dana, Evan, and 2 executives I'd never been looped with before. Subject line, Client Relationship Governance, Orchard Ridge, immediate. And when I saw who was on it, our VP of Sales and the Chief Risk Officer, I understood the real reason Craig wanted me gone before year-end. This wasn't a dinner problem. This was a credit problem, a control problem. And now it was going to be examined by people who didn't care who Craig liked. They cared who created exposure. My phone buzzed again. A text from Craig, just 6 words. Do not go to that dinner. No explanation, no call, just a directive. Written. I stared at it. then did exactly what Maya told me to do. I forwarded it to legal, and 10 minutes later, Dana from HR appeared at my desk with her hands clasped tightly, like she was holding herself together. "Ryan," she said quietly, "please come with me." I stood up, not because I was scared, because I could feel it. The last piece of Craig's plan was about to collapse in real time, and I was about to find out who was going to be left standing when it did. Dana didn't take me to a conference room. She took me to a floor I'd only been on twice. Executive offices, thicker carpet, doors that close softly. The kind of place where people don't raise their voices because they don't have to. We stopped outside a room with frosted glass and a small plaque that read, "Risk and Governance." Dana didn't meet my eyes when she said it. "They want to speak with you, just answer the questions directly." I nodded once. Inside, Maya from legal sat at the table with Evan from compliance. Across from them were two executives I'd only ever seen at all hands. Our VP of sales, Monica, and the chief risk officer, Tom. Craig was already there too. He was standing, not sitting, hands braced on the back of a chair like he was trying to look in control of his own body. When I walked in, Craig's face did something I hadn't seen all week. It flickered. Not fear exactly, more like the realization that the room had shifted out from under him. Tom gestured to the chair beside Maya. "Ryan, thanks for coming up." I sat down, calm, straight posture, no defensiveness. Tom opened a folder, the physical kind, printed pages, highlighted lines, a real record. "We're here because Orchard Ridge's CFO asked a governance question in writing," Tom said. "And because we have internal communications indicating conflicting direction." He glanced at Maya. She slid a page across the table toward him. Tom read from it without theatrics. "Better if he doesn't show up to the holiday dinner." Then he looked up at Craig. "Explain." Craig didn't laugh this time. He didn't charm. He didn't soften it with jokes. "It was a misphrasing," Craig said. "I meant we should keep things smooth and avoid tension." Monica, the VP of sales, leaned forward slightly. "What tension?" Craig hesitated. "Ryan has been difficult. He escalates. He makes things legal." Maya didn't react. Evan didn't react. Tom didn't react. Monica turned her eyes to me. "Ryan, did you escalate anything to the client?" "No," I said. "I avoided internal details. The client contacted me asking why I was removed from the agenda. I asked management for a directive in writing before responding." Tom nodded once and looked back to Craig. "So why was he removed from the agenda?" Craig's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked at Dana. Dana stared at her hands. Craig finally said, "We wanted Melissa to get exposure." Monica's expression didn't change. "Exposure to a CFO?" Craig tried to regain ground. "Melissa is capable. Ryan was creating friction with leadership." Tom lifted another sheet from the folder. "This is the text you sent yesterday," he said and read it out. "Do not go to that dinner." Tom set it down slowly. "That message was sent after legal instructed we should not misrepresent facts to a client." Craig's voice tightened. "Because Ryan would cause a scene. I spoke before anyone else could." Still calm. "I wasn't planning to cause a scene," I said. "I was planning to attend the dinner the client accepted based on. The only thing I did this week was ask for clarity in writing." Silence held for a moment, the kind of silence where decisions are being made without words. Then Tom asked the question that finally exposed the real motive. "Craig, was there any financial incentive tied to ownership of Orchard Ridge going into year end? Credit allocations? Performance review? Bonus metric?" Craig's face stayed still, but his throat moved. Swallowed, Monica looked at him like she'd already guessed the answer. Craig tried to deflect. "That's standard. Leadership has targets." Tom didn't let it slide. "Was Orchard Ridge in your personal target portfolio?" Craig paused too long. Evan spoke quietly, but his words were sharp. "We pulled the internal CRM activity log," Evan said. "The account owner field was edited twice this week. Once at 8:02 a.m. yesterday. Once again at 3:19 p.m. after legal entered the thread. Craig snapped his head. That's not accurate. Evan didn't argue. He turned his laptop slightly and pointed at the timestamp. That's the system record, Evan said. Edits were made under your credentials. The room didn't explode. Nobody yelled. That's not how serious consequences start. They start with confirmation. Tom took a breath and said, Craig, did you change the account owner designation without notifying the client, and while a performance framing meeting was scheduled with HR? Craig's jaw worked. He realized he couldn't deny the logs. He shifted to justification. Ryan doesn't own clients, he said. The company does. I was aligning resources. He's being territorial. And this time Monica's voice sharpened. No, she said. You were trying to move credit, days before year-end, in a way that triggered a client CFO to question governance. Craig opened his mouth again and stopped. Tom turned to me. Ryan, I have 2 questions. Answer yes or no. I nodded. Do you want to remain the account owner for Orchard Ridge? Yes, I said. Can you attend the dinner and keep it professional with Melissa supporting, without creating internal conflict in front of the client? Yes, I said. That was always my intent. Tom looked at Dana. HR will document that Ryan raised governance concerns appropriately, and that he requested directives in writing. Dinah's face tightened, but she nodded. Understood. Then Tom looked at Craig. Craig, you are removed from client communications on Orchard Ridge effective immediately. You are also on administrative leave pending an internal review of credential use and client governance. Craig's head snapped up. Administrative leave? For a calendar edit? Maya spoke for the first time in minutes, her tone neutral but final. For instructing an employee to misrepresent facts to a client CFO, attempting to create a false record of voluntary absence, and altering an account ownership field during a disputed period, she said. Yes. Craig looked around the room like someone waiting for a rescue. No one moved. That was when his face changed. Not anger anymore, a kind of emptiness. He looked at me once, one sharp, bitter glance, and then looked away. Tom stood. Ryan, you're cleared to attend the dinner. We will send a short governance note to Orchard Ridge, acknowledging continuity and confirming points of contact. Monica will be included. If the CFO asks why this happened, you keep it simple. Team support, continuity, and that's it. I nodded. Understood. Maya added. And Ryan, forward any contact from Craig to me. Do not engage. Dana escorted Craig out first. He didn't speak to me. He didn't need to. The silence was the loudest thing he'd had all week. Friday night, the holiday dinner was exactly what it should have been from the beginning. Calm, predictable, professional. Orchard Ridge's CFO shook my hand and said, Thanks for clearing that up. We don't like surprises. I don't either, I said. Melissa sat beside me, quiet at first. Then she leaned in and whispered, I'm sorry. I really didn't know. I believed her, because she looked like someone who'd learned the hard lesson early. Promotions sometimes come wrapped in someone else's downfall. I said, Just watch who asks you to do things without putting it in writing. She nodded like that sentence would live in her head for years. At the end of the night, Monica pulled me aside near the coat check. Ryan, she said, I'm not going to pretend this was handled well. It wasn't. But you did one thing correctly that most people don't. What's that? I asked. You didn't get emotional, she said. You got precise. 2 weeks later, January 6th, the first Monday back, the official notice hit my inbox. Craig's employment has been terminated. No details. No drama. Just a clean corporate sentence. And on the same day, I got another email. Subject, Orchard Ridge, account governance confirmation. It listed me as account owner. It listed Melissa as support. It listed Monica as executive sponsor. Below that, a line that felt like a quiet apology without admitting fault. Any changes to client-facing ownership will be documented and approved by Risk and Legal. I stared at it for a long moment, not because it felt like victory, because it felt like closure. Craig tried to erase me with a text message. He thought silence would make me disappear, but in the end, he wasn't undone by me. He was undone by his own record, and for the first time in weeks, I shut my laptop at a reasonable hour, walked out into the cold January air, and felt something I hadn't felt since this started. Peace. Not because I got revenge, because I got my name back on the agenda, on the account, and on the truth, and nothing was left unanswered.